All right, we got one more comic for you where we switch back to music. This is his first comedy set, so let's give a big round of applause to Ryan J. Everybody. Way to set expectations really low. Thank you though. But hey everybody, and I think it's a little too short. That's still set for other Ryan. Sorry. I've lived in Scranton for a couple months now, and it's pretty cool because I've never lived somewhere before where it seems like every single person has the same idea in their heads. Like, why would I go to therapy when the bar is a shorter drive from my house? And like, therapy doesn't have half-price boneless bites. So again, why would I go there? And so I haven't been going to therapy. I'm just out here, raw dogging reality like a fucking caveman. And but in doing that, I'm kind of just going through my life and trying to think of all the different things that happened and trying to figure out why I am the way I am. And so that brings me back to a lot of the trauma that I experienced. Anybody here have religious trauma? Yeah. Yeah. Anybody from the time they were like 3 or 4 were you told that if you didn't follow the rules of Sky Daddy that you'd be thrown into a hole where you'd be tortured for all of eternity and never get to see your family again? And then everybody was always like, wow, you're such a well-behaved little boy. And they thought that it was because you were being good, but it was actually because you were constantly filled with cosmic dread. Yeah, me neither. So I'm thinking about this stuff, and again, I've been hearing these stories for years and years and years, decades, and I've heard them lots of different ways. But I'm starting to realize that like a lot of the stories in the Bible, people kind of sleep on. Like you hear the big climactic part, like the one that comes to mind. If anybody knows the story of like Sodom and Gomorrah, like a lot of people know the climax of that story, the ending, right? These are these 2 towns that existed in the Bible that were so lit that God got jealous and destroyed them with fire and brimstone. But I don't think enough people think about what it was actually like to live in Sodom. Right? Like take a second and really go back and imagine you live in the biggest party town to ever exist. There's not a night that you go out that you can't get laid. Losing your virginity is a requirement to graduate high school. Really think about it and realize that your town isn't named after anal sex. Anal sex is named after your town. And I just imagine like the week that they announced that the committee came around, it must have been crazy. Like imagine going to your door in the morning, you pick up the newspaper and you're like, hey honey, great news. They named anal sex after us. All our work paid off. The mayor's definitely getting reelected now. Must have been a crazy time to live in Sodom. Probably a good time. Unless you worked at the elementary school. Because think about it. Think about that poor administrator who had to call a meeting and had to face the sea of parents and like not parents who just showed up anyway. And they had to go up and be like, all right, everybody. We're about to open the floor and discuss whether or not we're changing the name of Sodom Elementary School. And nobody's coming to that discussion with like goodwill, and nobody's going to approach this reasonably. You've got 2 sides and they're very far apart. You've got these people who are going to say, my kid's not going to anal sex elementary school. You keep that name and my family's pulling out. And you've got the other side who's going to be just as angry, but at the opposite opinion. You're going to have somebody who's like, the school's been named Sodom Elementary School for 100 years. My grandpappy was captain of the Sodomite Salt Lickers. My grandpa was on the team, I was on the team, and God damn it, my son's going to be a Sodomite Salt Licker too. And meanwhile, the poor kids, because they're going to be like, looking at each other like, do you know what that means? And they're all going to be like, yeah, I know what that means. And depending on the age, the older kids probably have a pretty good idea what they're talking about and probably need some correction, but like pretty good idea. But like, once that stuff goes down the telephone of the grades and like older sibling to younger sibling to their friend to kid in the bathroom to their sibling, there's going to be some first grade bullies who are like, hey Timmy, do you know what anal sex is? And he's going to be like, yeah, I do. It's when you pee in a cup and throw it on somebody's butt. Duh. And you know, as much as I think it's going to be a weird week to live in Sodom, I think it's going to be worse if you live in Gomorrah. Because you live in the second biggest party town to ever exist. You put in all that work, you've got these fundraisers, you've got all kinds of shit, and then the naming committee comes around and they're like, sorry guys, we gave the naming rights to Sodom. They just, they deserved it more. You're going to be pissed. That'd be like if tomorrow somebody came here and said, yeah, so from now on, blowing somebody in an alleyway for $10 worth of coke, that's going to be called Wilkes-Barreing them. Like, no, this is Scranton, that's our thing. We did it first, we do it better, we'll do it to you, please let me do it to you, I'm low on crack. And so then that got me thinking, you know, what is the Scranton Sex Act? What do we do better than anybody else in the world that we could get named Scrantoning? And I did some research. I went onto some websites that Armand recommended for me. And I saw some shit, but it didn't really help. And so then I figured, like, maybe the problem is, you know, I'm still kind of new here. I need to go get acquainted with the town. So I took a drive, and the whole time I'm going along, and I'm kind of thinking, like, what is it about, like, what do we do that nobody else does quite as well? And eventually it hit me, or you know, it's more accurate to say I hit it really hard. And I realized that Scrantoning somebody is not filling any of their holes. Scrantoning someone is leaving them gaping and wanting and a hazard to all of those around them. Thanks, everybody. If anybody needs me, I'm going to be Wilkes-Barreing somebody in the bathroom.